You don't need lots of fancy tools to be able to decorate cakes. I'm going to show you 8 ways to use things you already have at home to create stunning cake designs. After icing or frosting your cake, there are so many ways to decorate it without needing to buy lots of expensive tools and materials. You can make homemade versions of most tools, like cake stencils, which I'll make and use for this next cake. Hi, I'm Emily of British Girl Bakes. I can't wait to show you these techniques, so let's dive straight in. To make your own stencil for a cake, first measure the circumference of the cake, and the easiest way to do this is to wrap a piece of string or ribbon around the cake. Now you'll need baking paper, or parchment paper or wax paper. Use the string to measure a piece just long enough to wrap around the cake, and cut it so that it's about the same height as the cake too. I'm going to make a zigzag pattern for a border around the bottom of the cake, and to space the zigzags evenly, I'm folding the strip of paper in half, and then in half again, and again, and again, until it's the size that I want my zigzags to be. Cut diagonally up from one of the bottom corners, unfold the paper, and voila, a zigzag stencil. Put around your cake, lifting it up as high as you want the border to go, and press it against the cake. You need to put the cake in the fridge for at least an hour before doing this, so that it gets cold and firm, and that way you won't damage the buttercream icing or frosting when you press the stencil against it. Spread another colour of buttercream below the stencil to cover up the exposed part of the cake. Moving the cake from the fridge to room temperature will cause some tiny, practically invisible beads of condensation to form on the outside of the cake, and those will help the stencil stick. When you've worked your way around the whole cake, use the edge of your spatula or palette knife to smooth the buttercream you've just spread on, spinning your turntable to take off the excess buttercream until there's a thin, smooth layer left behind. Now pinch one of the top corners of the stencil and peel it off to reveal your zigzag pattern. And there it is, a pretty border to add some colour and detail to your cake. Now let's use chocolate to make a sparkly cake topper. Melt chocolate chips or a chopped up chocolate bar in the microwave at 70% power for 30 seconds at a time. Stir until it's smooth and then spoon the chocolate into a sandwich bag. You can use white chocolate or dark chocolate or whatever kind you like. Cut a tiny piece off one of the bottom corners of the bag and then draw a design or write a message onto a piece of baking paper or parchment paper or wax paper. Make the lines as thick as you can while still being legible, so that they're strong and less likely to snap than if they're thin. Push a toothpick into the bottom of each section and cover it up with some more chocolate. The lines don't need to be neat or smooth because next, cover them up by pouring sprinkles or coloured sugar over the top, pressing down gently to attach them to the melted chocolate. It's a good idea to do this on a cake board or a small tray or cutting board so that you can lift it up and put it into the freezer so that the chocolate sets quickly and it will be the strongest when it's cold. So then when you pick up the toothpicks to lift up the chocolate, it won't break. Then push the chocolate into the cake, and this is what the toothpicks are for, to secure the chocolate so that it stands up straight. This is such an easy way to make fun, colourful cake toppers. With just a simple spoon, you can create lots of interesting textures, which I'll show you on this next cake. If you struggle to get your buttercream smooth, texturing it is a great option. Use a cake comb or icing scraper to get the sides of the cake straight and the top level, but don't worry about indents or any imperfections on the surface of the buttercream. As soon as you've finished, press the back of a spoon gently into the side of a cake as you spin the cake on the turntable, letting the spoon imprint a groove in the buttercream. Drag the spoon slowly up the sides of the cake as you finish each lap around the cake so that the texture continues all the way up. If buttercream builds up on the spoon, you can always swipe away, clean the spoon, and then start again. This works best straight after frosting the cake while the buttercream is still very soft. And you'll get the neatest results if you dip your spoon into a cup of hot water and then dry it before pressing it against the cake. The hot metal will glide easily across the buttercream and leave a smooth surface behind. You can leave the top edge unfinished, like this, or push sideways with a spatula to flatten and smooth it. This is a fun technique to do because it's not precise, and the result is pretty and rustic. Now let's rewind and try a different texture also using a spoon. This is a similar technique, but in a different direction. Press the back of the spoon into the cake and drag upwards, pushing gently against the buttercream to leave a trail going up the sides of the cake. Keep pulling all the way up above the top of the cake to leave a peak at the top of each one. Start each one right beside the previous one, overlapping slightly so that there aren't any gaps in between the texture. This also works best with a spoon that's been dipped into hot water, and if you skip that step, you might get little air pockets in the buttercream where the spoon pulls and tears it. You can leave the peaks at the top of the cake as they are, or tidy them up with your spatula, like I did with the last texture. This is another simple design that's a great base for other decorations, like cake toppers for example. Let's rewind again for a third texture using a spoon. This time, use your spoon in every direction to make little arc shapes in the buttercream, curving up and down and side to side to completely cover the cake with random swooshes of texture. I often say less is more, but that's not the case here, because I think this texture looks best all over the cake rather than having a few scattered swooshes around the cake. At the top of the cake, as you curve your spoon around, you'll push the buttercream up above the top edge, and you can leave it like that or level it with your spatula to make a straight top edge. For any of these textures created with a spoon, cake toppers will turn these simple cakes into something much more eye-catching. A very quick way to add detail to any cake is with fresh or artificial flowers. Wash them and let them dry, and then wrap the stems in cling film or plastic wrap so that they don't come into contact with the cake. Wrap large flowers on their own, or I like to group little bunches of flowers together. Fresh flowers are beautiful, but if you want to decorate the cake a day or two in advance, artificial flowers won't wilt or discolor. Push the wrapped stems into the cake and ta-da! For this next cake, I'll use a cupcake pan to mix my buttercream colours. It's much more convenient than using lots of little bowls because it's quicker to wash up afterwards compared to using a different bowl for each colour. Put a bit of buttercream into each hole, add some colour, stir to mix it in, and you have a buttercream colour palette. For this next technique, you'll need the buttercream on your cake to set, so it's firm. So put your cake in the fridge for about an hour. Then scoop up a colour and spread it onto the cake. And since the icing or frosting has set, the colours won't blend into it. They'll sit on top, and the colour will chill quite quickly after you've spread it on. So as you continue to add colours all over the cake, scraping off the excess to leave a thin layer of each colour on the cake, these colours won't blend together much, so you'll end up with a bold oil-painted effect, rather than a blended watercolour effect. If you want the colours to mix even less, add one colour at a time and scrape off all of the excess before you add the next colour. And by then, the previous colour will have chilled and set, and you'll have even less blending of the colours. Now let's add a stencil design to the top of the cake. Draw a shape, like this heart, onto baking paper or wax paper or parchment paper, and cut it out. Position it on your cake after the cake has been in the fridge for at least an hour, and spread buttercream onto the stencil to cover up the shape you've cut out. You can use one colour or several colours. Scrape and smooth it with a spatula or cake comb to leave just a thin layer, and then peel off the stencil. It's important to take the stencil off as soon as you finish spreading the colours onto it, because while that frosting is still soft and sticky, you'll get the neatest edge to your design. Use a toothpick to touch up any smudges, which happen if the stencil moves at all while you're spreading the colours on. This is such a quick and cheap and easy way to add an interesting detail to your cake. And there they are, 8 different ways to decorate cakes without using fancy tools. If you try any of these, please tag British Girl Bakes so I can see what you come up with. And if you're looking for more tutorials, visit my online cake school on BritishGirlBakes.com.